So, you and Juan, huh? The voice came from behind him. Eunho did not turn his head. He kept his eyes on the concrete floor in front of the chair. His wrists were tied to the arms of the chair, his ankles to the legs. Jiwan walked into his line of sight. He was in shirt sleeves. He was smiling. It was the smile from the coffee shop 7 years ago. "Hi, sweetheart." Eunho's mouth was dry. The peach in his collar was rising for the first time in front of this man since the 2nd year of their marriage. He had not understood, until now, that he was no longer afraid of him. "Stop calling me sweetheart." Jiwan laughed, small, surprised. The smile thinned. He took 2 steps forward and bent down and closed his hand around the collar of Eunho's shirt and twisted it tight against Eunho's throat. "You are going home with me tonight," Jiwan said through his teeth. "You are going to learn what the last 7 years were the easy version of, and I am going to call you sweetheart whenever I damn want to." Behind them, the metal door of the warehouse made a sound. It was not the sound of a door being opened. It was the sound of a door being broken. Jiwan's head turned. A voice came from the doorway. "Get your filthy hands off of him. Before we dive in, let me know in the comments where you're watching from. Now, sit back, relax, and enjoy today's story." The day Eunho was taken from the hotel had begun like every other day there. One in the hallway at 6 with 2 coffees. The walk to the diner. Porridge. The diner woman. An ordinary morning at the end of 5 ordinary weeks. One had told him at breakfast that he was leaving for a few hours and would be back at noon. He would bring breakfast from the bakery up the coast. Eunho had asked for the yakwa. One had said he would see what he could do. One had walked Eunho back across the road. They had taken the elevator up together. One had stopped on the 3rd floor before going down to the lobby. One had said, "Be safe." Eunho had said, "You be safe." The doors had closed on one going down. Eunho had gone back into his room. He had drawn for an hour. The inside of his grandmother's kitchen again, working out the corner of the brass kettle he had not gotten right the first time. He had been thinking about the yakwa, about Saturdays when he was 9. He had been smiling at the page. The cart sound came at 9. It was a Tuesday. The hotel did housekeeping at 9 on Tuesdays. The cart was the cart. It moved down the hallway and stopped at the door across from his. He set down the pencil because he liked the housekeeping woman and he wanted to be looking up when she said good morning. She did not knock at his door. He heard her cart move on. Then his own door opened. He understood later that the men had come up the back stairwell while the cart was making the corridor sound. They had been waiting on the floor above for the housekeeping woman to pass. 2 men walked into his room. The first was holding a small white cloth in his right hand. The second was looking at the wool coat on the back of the chair. Eunho registered, with the part of his mind still working, that the man knew which coat was his. He opened his mouth. He did not have time to make a sound. The first man was across the room. The cloth was over his face. The hand was around the back of his neck. He tried to pull away. The man was much stronger. He had not been in a fight in his life. The cloth was wet. It smelled wrong, sweet and chemical, and cold, and his lungs took it in. He thought, in the narrowing space of his mind, about the wool coat on the chair. He thought, one will see the coat. One will see the coat, and he will know. Then the room closed. The next thing was movement. He was upright, but not standing. Being held under both armpits, carpet under his feet, moving down a hallway. He heard a stairwell door open. The hum of industrial light. Cold air of a backloading area against his face. The ding of the lobby elevator in the distance, and he understood that Juan was not in the lobby because Juan had not finished his errand yet, and that the men had known Juan was gone. The next thing was the inside of a van. He was on the floor. His hands were bound in front of him with something soft. Soft binding meant they had been told not to mark him visibly, which meant whoever had ordered this wanted him to walk into a room looking unmarked, which meant Jiwan. The van moved. There were no windows. Two men on the bench, looking forward, not at him. They did not speak. He thought about his mother. He thought about the persimmon tree. He thought about Juan walking back into the hotel at noon with a bag of yakwa and finding the empty room. He cried quietly because he did not want the men to register his face. The van drove for a long stretch. When the van stopped, the back doors opened. He was lifted out. Yellow industrial light, the smell of concrete and dust and old metal. Through a door, down a corridor, into a large open space. 3 men were standing along the back wall, the kind of men he had seen at the edges of family events for years. Jiwan's men, the kind who did things and went home and did not talk about them. They sat him in a chair. They tied his wrist to the arms. They tied his ankles to the legs. The man tying it did not look at his face. They stepped back. Nobody spoke. The light overhead hummed. He heard a generator somewhere outside. He did not know how long he sat in the chair before the door opened. He heard the footsteps before he saw the man. He had known those footsteps half his adult life. His body knew them before his eyes did. The peach in his collar had been holding faintly since he had woken up in the van, surprising him with the fact that it had not vanished altogether, and now, with the footsteps, it began to thin. He pressed his palms flat against the wood of the chair arms because he could not press them flat against anything else. Jiwan walked into the room. He was in shirt sleeves. He had taken his coat off somewhere outside, the way a man takes a coat off before he sits down to a meal he plans to enjoy. He stopped behind the chair. Eunho could not see him. He could only smell him. So, you and Juan, huh? Eunho did not turn his head. How was slutting around with my brother? Jiwan walked into Eunho's line of sight. He stopped a few feet away. The thinness was coming off him. The bergamot was trying to cover it. The bergamot was failing. One of the men along the wall glanced at his boss's face and looked away again. The small private acknowledgement of an employee who had seen this version of the man before. Tell me, sweetheart, did you enjoy it? The brother who collected you off a train platform. The brother who sat in the corridor of a hotel for 3 weeks while you cried into a sketchbook. Did he make you feel special? Did he make you feel like you were the only thing he was paying attention to? Because that's the version, is it not? He has been using it since we were teenagers. He is patient, he waits, and when the Omega has been waiting long enough that they'd walk through a wall to be picked up by him, he picks them up, and then he puts them down. Eunho did not look up. Look at me, Eunho. He did not look up. Look at me. He looked up. Jiwan was smiling. The smile from the coffee shop. The smile from every Sunday call. The smile he had been pulling off his face like a clean shirt for as long as Eunho had known him. There you are. Hi, sweetheart. Eunho registered, while Jiwan was still pulling on the smile, that the man who had ruined his life was at the end just a man. A weak alpha pretending to be a strong one. The cologne and the bergamot, and the smile and the sweetheart. All of it costume. He was scared. He was bound. He did not know what was about to happen, but he was not afraid of the man anymore. Stop calling me sweetheart. The room was quiet. The 3 men against the wall did not move. Jiwan laughed. It was small, surprised. Excuse me. Stop calling me sweetheart. Jiwan raised his eyebrows. He turned to look at one of the men along the wall, an exaggerated turn, the kind of turn a man makes when he is performing astonishment for an audience. Did you hear that? He said, stop calling him sweetheart. The man did not respond. Jiwan turned back to Eunho. The smile was still there. The smile was holding. Sweetheart, I've been calling you sweetheart for 7 years. I'm going to call you sweetheart for the rest of our lives, so I'm going to ask again. Did you enjoy it? With my brother? Did you enjoy slutting around with him while my ring was still on you? Eunho's voice came up small. You didn't love me. The smile thinned. What did you say? You didn't love me. Eunho, I don't know if you can. He stopped. The breath caught. He kept going. My body knew before I knew. Jiwan's face was changing. It wouldn't give you what you wanted. 3 times. I thought it was my fault. He stopped. He pulled in a breath. The breath shook. It wasn't my fault. Eunho, you aren't my husband. You haven't been. I know that now. He stopped again. The next thing was the hardest. He had to find it. You went into my mother's kitchen. You took her voice on the phone. You used it like a weapon. The smile was gone. You're nothing to me. The men along the wall did not move. The peach in his collar was rising. It was not vanishing. It was rising. Jiwan's face had gone flat. The performance was gone. There was no warmth left in him, and no charm, and no version of the kind son-in-law who drank tea in mother's kitchens. There was only the man underneath, the man Eunho had been married to and had only been able to see in fragments, the man who had always been there behind the smile and was now standing in front of him in shirt sleeves with his bergamot vanishing into nothing. He took 2 steps forward. He bent down. He put his face close to Eunho's face. His breath was warm on Eunho's cheek. His hand came up and closed around the collar of Eunho's shirt. You are going to regret every word you just said. The hand twisted. The collar tightened against Eunho's throat. You are mine. You have always been mine. He has been borrowing you. He has been keeping you warm for a month while I figured out where you were. You are going home with me. You are going home tonight. You aren't going to like the welcome I've prepared for you. He said the last part through his teeth, the smile gone, the bergamot gone, the cooled tobacco gone, only the thinness left. And I am going to call you sweetheart whenever I damn want to. Eunho did not believe him. He did not know why he believed he was not going to be taken home that night. The peach in his collar had been holding the whole conversation, rising under Jiwan's bergamot like something coming up through water, and the peach knew something his mind did not. The peach knew Juan was in the world. The peach knew Juan had said yesterday morning at the diner, when I come back I am bringing you yakwa. The peach knew the door was going to break. The door broke. A voice came from the doorway. Get your filthy hands off of him. One had taken the 2 outer guards before he had come into the room. No weapon. No raised voice. He had walked in through the back of the warehouse, mapped over the time it had taken Doyun's people to find the building, and the 2 men at the back door had registered him too late. The first was on the floor before he had finished turning. The second managed to get a hand up. One took the wrist with his left hand and the throat with his right and put him down without breaking either. He had been preparing for this walk for 15 years. Not this exact warehouse. The muscle memory. When he heard Jiwan's voice through the metal door, the iron in the air around him went past the foundry it had been at on the platform a month ago. That foundry had been a working temperature. This was not a working temperature. This was a temperature a man uses once. The walnut was gone. He kicked the door. Not the lock. The hinges. He had measured the door on the way in. The door was old, the hinges corroded. It went down sideways and hit the concrete, and he stepped into the room. His eyes went to Eunho first. To Eunho in the chair with his wrists tied to the wood and his hair across his forehead and his collar bunched in Jiwan's fist, the peach rising so strongly that Juan's chest registered it before his mind did. Then his eyes went to Jiwan's hand. Get your filthy hands off of him. Jiwan's head was already turning, his hand was already letting go of the collar. His mouth was opening to say something a man like Jiwan would have prepared. He never got to say it. One crossed the room. He did not run. He walked. He did not raise his hands until he was at Jiwan's reach, and when he raised them, the first closed around Jiwan's collar with the same grip Jiwan had been using on Eunho's, and the second came around the back of Jiwan's neck and turned the man inside his own clothes. Eunho saw his husband's face up close in the air for the last time. One was not looking at Jiwon. One was looking at Eunho. I'm here, Juan said. The voice was the voice from the platform. It was for Eunho. The iron was for the man between his hands. Then he threw Jiwan, not at a wall and not at the men along the wall, but out of the path between him and Eunho, into the open concrete. Jiwan hit the floor and did not get up. His head had hit wrong. His arm was under him, at an angle arms did not usually go. The men came off the wall, 3 in the room plus the 2 from the van, 5. One went for Eunho first, crossing the last steps to the chair and putting one hand on Eunho's face, palm flat against his cheek, careful, like a man putting a hand on a child's face in a hospital. He looked at Eunho. Eunho looked at him. Eunho did not have time to say anything before 2 of the men reached Juan. The first hit him across the back and Juan did not stagger, and Juan turned and took the man's wrist on the second swing and put him down without ceremony. The second came in with a knife. Juan took the knife from him, set it on the concrete behind him because he did not need it and did not want it in his hand, and he hit the man twice and the man went down. 3 left in the room, and 3 at once was the math the room had been built for. 2 went for his arms, 1 went for his legs. 1 got one of them down with the grip on his right arm, turning with the momentum, but the second got a hand around his throat from behind, and the third got his legs, and 1 went down on 1 knee, and the grip tightened. Eunho had not made a sound since Juan had walked into the room. His wrists were tied to the chair. He could not do anything, and his peach was rising in the air around him, but the peach was not going to do anything either, because the peach was an Omega's scent, and the men in the room did not work for an Omega. One was choking. He was working his elbow toward the second man's ribs, but the angle was wrong and his vision was starting to go. Jiwan, in the corner, was beginning to push himself up on his unbroken arm. The peach in the air thinned because Eunho's body had figured out, before his mind had, that the man holding the world up was about to go down. The metal door of the warehouse made another sound, and this time it was 3 doors. Front and back and side, all at the same time. Doyun came through the front with his men behind him. The room flipped in moments. The hand on Juan's neck let go because a man behind him hit the man across the forearm hard enough to loosen the grip, and the grip on Juan's legs let go because Doyun had crossed the room in 3 strides and put his boot in the man's ribs. Juan got up, not steady at first. Doyun did not look at him. Doyun's men moved through the room with the efficiency of men who were not going to make this take longer than it needed to. The first man was rolled onto his stomach. The second zip-tied. The third hauled up by his shirt. Jiwan, on the concrete, made a sound. Doyun walked over. He did not hit Jiwan. He did not pick him up. He stood over him without speaking. "You broke your arm, Jiwan." Jiwan did not answer. "I'm not going to set it for you. The medics will after the police are done." Jiwan still did not answer. Doyun crouched down. "You used to be a kid. Whatever happened to you, you made the choice to become this. The part where you were going to get away with it's over now." He stood up. He walked across the room to where one was kneeling next to the chair. One had untied Eunho's wrist one at a time with both hands, loosening the rope rather than pulling at it. The first wrist came free, and one took Eunho's hand and pressed it against his own chest before going to the second wrist. The second came free, and one took that hand too. Eunho had been looking at Juan's face the entire time. Doyun stopped a few feet away. "Eunho." Eunho looked over. "I'm Doyun. We met a few times when you were younger. I didn't introduce myself properly. I'm sorry it had to be tonight." Eunho tried to say something. The word would not come up. "You don't have to talk. We are getting out of here. One is going to walk you to the car. I'm going to handle the rest of this. There are things to handle and you don't need to see them. Okay." Eunho nodded. One bent down. He slid one arm under Eunho's knees and the other behind his shoulders and picked him up without asking. Eunho put one arm around Juan's neck. The peach in his collar came back fully. One, holding him, let his own walnut rise for the first time in 15 years. The walnut came up around the iron banked. One walked out of the warehouse with Eunho in his arms. Doyun stopped in the corridor to give an instruction to one of his men. One did not stop. He walked Eunho through the corridor, out the back, across the loading bay to the car in the lot. The car was Doyun's, an older sedan, dark and anonymous. Doyun was going to drive. One opened the back door and set Eunho down without taking his arm off him. He took off his own coat and wrapped it around Eunho's shoulders. The wool coat smelled like iron and walnut and the inside of a hotel corridor, and Eunho put his face into the collar. One got in beside him. Eunho leaned against him. One's arm came around him, hand on his wrist, the thumb making a small circle against the bone. Doyun came out a little later, still on his phone. He hung up, started the car, and looked in the rear view. Eunho, are you good back there? Do you need anything before we drive? Eunho found a small voice. I'm cold. There is a blanket in the trunk. 2 seconds. Doyun got out, came back, handed a blanket over the seat. One spread it over Eunho's lap on top of the coat. Eunho was not cold once the blanket was on him. He had not really been cold. He had wanted something to be wrapped in. The car pulled out of the lot. Eunho did not look back. Whatever was happening in the warehouse was happening in a place his life no longer included. Nobody spoke for a long stretch. The sound was the road and Doyun's blinker and the ticking of a cold heater warming up. Eunho's face was against the wool of Wan's coat, Wan's hand on his wrist, Wan's other arm around his shoulders. Doyun cleared his throat. Wan. Yes. Thank you for coming when you did. I'd have been a few minutes longer. Thank you for coming at all. Of course. A pause. Doyun. Yes. Thank you. I don't think I've said that yet. Thank you. You don't need to say it. I've known what you were going to need from me for 15 years. I was glad to finally do it. One's hand tightened on Eunho's wrist briefly. Eunho felt it. He did not say anything. He kept his face against the wool. Doyun glanced into the rearview mirror. Eunho, how are you doing? Eunho took a breath in. The breath worked. He took another. I'm still here. Good. That is enough for tonight. The car drove on. Doyun let the silence sit through a small town, a stretch with no streetlights. Another small town. After a while, he spoke again. Eunho, can I tell you something about your husband? Eunho said, Okay. He used to be a kid. I don't say it to defend him. I don't say it to ask you to feel sorry for him. I say it because for years I thought I should have done something, when we were children, that would have stopped him from becoming what he became. The truth is, I don't think there was anything any of us could have done. He made the choice. What he did to you wasn't something you caused. It wasn't something my cousin caused. It was something your husband chose, every day, for the entire time you knew him. Eunho was quiet. He watched the road slide by outside the window, the headlights catching nothing but black road and the occasional stripe of frost. Thank you for saying that. You are welcome. He thought for the first time, the sentence he had not been able to think for any of those years. I did not do this to him. He did this to himself. I am free of it. He cried quietly into the wool of Wan's coat. One felt the shake of it and did not say anything. He pressed his thumb against the bone of Eunho's wrist a little more firmly and held him. Doyun drove. The car drove east, toward the coast, toward the small city outside Seoul, where Eunho's mother had cared for the persimmon tree for as long as Eunho had been alive. It was late by the time they reached the gate. It was the gate Eunho had walked through every summer of his childhood. The gate Doyun's people had been holding in shifts since the day Wan had called him from the diner. Doyun pulled up to the gate and rolled down the window. A man in plain clothes walked over, looked into the car, saw Eunho, stepped back, raised one hand. The gate opened. The car pulled into the driveway. The kitchen window of the house was lit. Through the lace curtain his mother had hung when he was 12, Eunho could see the shape of her at the table, turning a page, settled in for an evening with a book. Eunho did not move. Doyun put the car in park, turned off the engine, and turned around in the driver's seat. "I'll say goodnight from here. I'm not coming in. Tonight is yours. Your mother does not need a third face she does not know in her entryway. One will walk you to the door. I'll wait until you are inside, then I'll go." Eunho nodded. He sat for one more second. Then he opened the car door. The cold air of the eastern coast in winter came into the car, the smell of his mother's kitchen, faint, the warmth of a house that had been heated all day, came in with it. Eunho stood up. His legs worked. He had not been sure they would. The wool coat was still around his shoulders. One got out beside him, did not put a hand on his back, walked beside him a step behind, just close enough to be there if Eunho stopped. Eunho walked the path to the front door of the house he had grown up in. He did not have to knock. The door was unlocked because his mother always left the front door unlocked when his father was still up. He turned the handle. He opened it. The smell of the entry hit him. Wood polish and the ghost of dinner, and the faint sweetness of the dried herb sachets his mother kept in the front closet. He stepped inside. His mother was at the kitchen table. Her back was 3/4 to the door. The shoulders were the shoulders he had drawn from memory in a sketchbook in a hotel a month ago. She had a paperback open in front of her and a half-finished cup of tea and a small bowl of orange peels she had been picking at while she read. She had not heard the car. She had not heard the door. One stood behind him in the entry. Eunho said the smallest word he could find. "Mom." The book closed on her hand. She turned. For a moment she did not move. Her face did not change. Her body did not change. Her brain was deciding what was real. Then her face broke. She set the book down. She crossed the kitchen, not running, the steps of a woman who had been waiting for the moment to be the moment for so long that her body did not know how to receive it. She got to him. She put both hands on his face. She did not say anything. She held his face and she looked at him. And she cried without making any sound. Eunho put his own hands over her hands and held them against his cheeks, and he cried too, and the smell of the entry filled around them, and the wool coat of his alpha was around his shoulders. Behind them, one took one quiet step back into the threshold to give them the moment. He did not leave. He did not take his eyes off Eunho. Eunho's father came in from the living room with a book in his hand. He stopped at the doorway between the rooms. He looked at his son. He did not move. Eunho looked at him over his mother's shoulder. His father's face did not change much. It was not a face that changed much, but Eunho saw the corner of his mouth. He saw the corner of his father's eyes. His father set the book down. He walked across the room. He put his hand on Eunho's shoulder, on top of the wool coat, and he kept it there. He did not say anything. In this house, that was welcome home. After a while, Eunho's mother stepped back. She wiped her face with the back of her wrist. She looked past Eunho at the man in the doorway. She had not spoken to Jiwan at the wedding. She had seen him across a room. She had heard his name on Sunday calls for years. The older brother, the careful one. The one Jiwan spoke about in a tone Jiwan did not use about anyone else. She had not put the face and the name together in her own kitchen until she saw the shape of his brow. One took a step into the entry. "Mrs. Han, I'm sorry to bring him to you at this hour. My name is One." Her face moved just once, a small private settling. She did not say anything aloud, but Eunho saw it land. She had placed him on the doorstep, and she was choosing not to make him say it tonight. Her son was hurt. The rest could be tomorrow. "Come in. Take off your shoes." One took off his shoes. He hung his coat on the hook by the door, the coat that had been around Eunho's shoulders. Eunho did not let it go. He held it in both hands and carried it with him into the kitchen. His mother put the kettle on. His father got a third chair from the corner of the living room. His mother brought a fourth out from the dining room. 4 chairs. She did not ask anything yet. She made the tea, poured it, set a cup in front of each of them, and sat down. She looked at her son. "Eunho." "Yes." "Are you hurt anywhere I should be looking at tonight?" "No." "Are you safe in this house?" "Yes." "Is anyone coming to this door tonight?" "No, Mom. Nobody is coming. There are people at the gate. They are friends. One's people. They are there because one asked them to be there. We are safe. She nodded slowly. She drank her tea. Then we are going to drink this tea. And we are going to go to sleep. And tomorrow you are going to tell me what you can tell me. You don't have to tell me anything tonight. Tonight you are home. That is all I need to know about tonight. Eunho's eyes filled. He could not speak for a moment. Okay. One looked up. Yes, Mrs. Han. Thank you for driving him. You are welcome. Have you eaten? Some hours ago? Then eat with us tomorrow morning. Tonight it's tea. Yes, Mrs. Han. They sat at the table and drank the tea. Nobody talked. The kettle clicked as it cooled. Eunho's father reached across the table once and took his wife's hand and held it. Eunho watched the persimmon tree out the kitchen window, dark in the winter light, bare branches against the moon. Around midnight, Eunho's mother said, "You should sleep. Your room is just as you left it. There is only the one room. You and one will share." "I'm sorry." One said, "That isn't a problem." "Good night, sweetheart." The word landed in him like a small warm weight. It had been a word that meant something cold for years. It was being given back to him by the person who had owned it first. "Good night, Mom." Eunho stood up. He walked over to his mother's chair, bent down, put his arms around her shoulders from behind, pressed his face into her hair. She put her hands over his hands and sat very still and let her son hold her. He stood up. He walked back around the table. He said goodnight to his father. His father did not stand up to hug him, but he reached out and gripped Eunho's hand, briefly, when he passed, and let go. Eunho picked up the wool coat from the back of his chair. He carried it with him into the hallway. One followed. They went up the stairs to the second floor and down the small hallway to the room at the end. And Eunho opened the door of the bedroom he had not slept in since he was 18. The bedroom was untouched. The bed was made with the corners tight and a small folded throw at the foot. The desk had the same row of books on the shelf above it, the same lamp at the corner. The window faced the back garden. The persimmon tree was visible through the glass, dark in the winter light, bare branches against the moon. One closed the door behind them gently. The room was small. There was the bed, the desk, a small armchair in the corner. Eunho set the wool coat on the armchair. He sat down on the edge of the bed. One did not sit down. He stood by the door, then walked to the desk and looked at the books on the shelf, giving Eunho on the bed a moment. Eunho watched him. One was a tall man in a small bedroom. He had to duck slightly under the low edge of the bookshelf. The walnut in him was the warmest it had been in the air around Eunho in a month. The iron was banked. He looked tired. The tired of a man who had been doing too much for too long and had finally let himself notice it. One turned. "Yes. Sit down, please." One sat down on the bed beside him, leaving a few inches of space. He put his hands on his knees, careful, the same posture he had taken in the corridor of the hotel. A man trying not to take up more room than the room could hold. For a while neither of them said anything. The clock ticked. The wind moved the bare branches of the persimmon tree. One. "Yes. I want to tell you what the last 7 years felt like." "I'm listening." Eunho took a breath. It wasn't the things that happened. The things that happened were terrible. But the worst part was the texture. It was like a film over the world. Food. Light. My own face in a mirror. My mother's voice on a Sunday call. Nothing felt real. By the second year, I could remember realness, but I couldn't feel it. I had forgotten what calm was. I had forgotten what it was to be in a room and not be paying attention to the door. I thought I had broken. I thought it was permanent. He looked at the persimmon tree through the window. "The first morning at the hotel, when you brought me coffee, I drank it without thinking. The coffee was hot. That was the thing I noticed. I hadn't been able to register that a drink was hot for years. The coffee in your hand on that first morning was hot. I felt it on my tongue. I felt the steam on my face. It was the first thing in years that hadn't been behind the film. One did not move. And then it was every morning. The coffee, the diner, the porridge, the smell of the snow, the walnut in your scent, all of it kept being real. The film was gone. He looked at one. 3 weeks at that hotel was the first time I had been awake in 7 years. You were a different reality. With you, it was like waking up. It still is. One did not say anything. The walnut in his scent rose. He swallowed. His eyes were wet, briefly, and then they were not. He put his arm around Eunho's shoulders. He did not pull. The arm just settled there. Eunho leaned in slightly. One's arm closed a fraction around him. One's hand began to move along Eunho's arm. Slow. The thumb moved down the outside of his upper arm. The palm followed. A slow caress no one had given Eunho in years. The motion of a man who had been told he could touch, and was finally, after a month of careful distances, allowing himself. Eunho closed his eyes. He leaned his head onto Juan's shoulder. The wool of Juan's sweater was against his temple. The walnut and iron strong this close. He could hear Juan's heart beating through the fabric. He had not been this close to another human being in a long time without fear in his body. He stayed there. After some time, he lifted his head and looked up at Juan's face. Juan was already looking at him. They looked at each other. The look had everything in it. The platform, the corridor, the diner, the snow, the kitchen downstairs. Eunho leaned in. Juan met him. The kiss was slow. Not the kind two people have in the middle of a panic. Not the kind when two people have been wanting each other for too long and are finally tearing at each other. The kind that comes after a war has ended. Reverent. Held longer than a first kiss usually is. One's hand had moved up from Eunho's arm to the side of his neck, palm open, fingers spread. Eunho's hand had come up and rested against the front of Juan's sweater, fist closed around a bit of the fabric, holding on like a child holds a blanket to keep it from being taken. When they broke apart, neither of them moved away. One's forehead came against Eunho's. Their breathing was close. Eunho could smell the walnut and the faint iron underneath it, and his own peach rising fully, and the 2 scents in the room making a third thing between them. One. Yes. I want to sleep here. With you. Just sleep. Yes. I haven't slept in this house in 7 years. I haven't slept in this bed since I was 18. I haven't slept next to anyone without being afraid of the next thing. I want my first night back to be that. The not being afraid. Yes. Is that all right? Eunho. Yes. It is all right. I'm not going to ask for anything from you tonight. I'm not going to ask for anything from you tomorrow. I'm not going to ask for anything until you tell me you want me to ask. Is that all right? Yes. He kissed one again, briefly, because he wanted to. The kiss was not a beginning of anything more. It was the answer to what Juan had just said, given with his mouth instead of a nod. They got under the blanket. They did not change. Eunho took off his shoes. One took off his shoes. The sweaters and the shirt stayed on. They lay down on Eunho's old bed, the bed his mother had kept made all these years. One put one arm under Eunho's head and the other around his waist. Eunho turned into him, face in the side of One's neck. The peach rose. The walnut rose to meet it. One. Yes. This is the safest I've ever been. I know. I'm going to sleep now. I know. He slept. He slept like he had not slept in years. He did not wake at 3. He did not wake at 5. He did not wake at all until the gray light of morning was at the window, and One's arm was still around his waist, and One had not moved. Eunho lay still with his eyes open. He listened to One breathing. One was awake. Eunho could tell by the rhythm. One had been awake and had not moved because he had not wanted to wake Eunho. One. Hi. How long have you been awake? A while? You should have moved. I didn't want to. Were you watching me sleep? Some of the time. Some of the time I was watching the persimmon tree. Eunho laughed. It came out small, but it came out. He had not laughed first thing in the morning in years. He turned over inside Won's arm. Won loosened it to let him turn. They came face to face. Won's morning face was softer than the others, the hair slightly disordered, the eyes a degree warmer. Eunho put his hand on the side of Won's face. He had not touched Won's face before. Won closed his eyes under the touch, then opened them. Good morning? Good morning. He kissed Won. Slow, brief, morning style. Then he tucked his face back into Won's neck. Downstairs, his mother was already in the kitchen. The kettle was going. His father was moving around in the living room. The smell of breakfast began to drift up. Underneath it, faintly, the smell of warm sugar and butter, the sweetness of a cake going into the oven on a Wednesday morning, because today, her son was home. He did not get up yet. He stayed in his old bed with the alpha he had chosen, in the house he had grown up in, and let the morning happen around them. They came down to breakfast holding hands. Eunho's mother saw it. She did not comment. She set a plate in front of each of them, poured them coffee, and said good morning. The good morning was warmer than the good night had been. Eunho's father looked at the two of them sitting down across from him. The corner of his mouth moved. He went back to his newspaper. Breakfast was quiet. The carrot cake was on the wire rack on the counter, cooling. His mother had made it that morning while they slept. Eunho understood without being told. The cake was the cake of his childhood, the one she had made on the Saturdays his grandmother could not make the yakwa. She had baked it for him at the first opportunity. He did not need a longer explanation. After breakfast, Won got up to clear his plate. He took Eunho's plate too, and his mother's. He carried them to the sink and stayed there, washing slowly, giving Eunho and his mother the room. Eunho's mother sat down across from him at the table and folded her hands. His father stayed in his chair, not pretending to read this time, his hands resting flat on the folded paper in front of him. Quiet, listening. Eunho. Yes. You said you would tell me today. I will. You don't have to tell me everything. Tell me what you can. I'm going to listen, and I'm not going to interrupt, and I'm not going to ask anything that would make this harder. When you are done telling, you are done. Whatever else there is, we will get to over time. Eunho nodded. He told her. He did not tell her everything. He told her that the marriage had not been what it had looked like on Sundays. He told her that Jiwan, on the phone, was not the man Jiwan had been at home. He told her that he had left in February because he could not stay. He told her that on the platform that night a man had found him, and that the man had taken him to a hotel, and that the man had kept him safe for 3 weeks while figuring out how to handle what needed to be handled. He stopped before the warehouse. He stopped before the kidnapping. He told her there had been a difficult last day, and that it was over, and that the man who had hurt him was not going to be allowed to come near her or near him ever again. Then he said the rest of it. Mom, the man who drove me home last night, you knew when he gave you his name. He's Jiwan's older brother. He has been getting me out for years. The man you drank tea with on Sunday calls, and at our wedding was not the man one is. They came out of the same house. They are not the same. His mother did not look surprised. She had spent the night with it. Her eyes moved past Eunho once, to Won at the sink and back. She put her hands flat on the table and looked at her hands. I made him tea in this house. I cut him cake. I let him sit in this kitchen, and I let him take that phone out of your hand on Sunday afternoons, and I did not stop it. I did not ask the right questions. I did not press when I should have pressed. I let him. Mom, I am going to ask you something, and you are going to be honest with me. Did I make these last 7 years easier for him? Mom, don't. Did I? You loved him because he was kind to you on the phone. He was very good at being kind on the phone. He was good at it because he had been practicing it on me for years. You aren't responsible for that. He was the one who was lying. You were the one who was lied to. She did not answer. I am going to be sorry about this for the rest of my life. You are going to be sorry about it for some time. Then you are going to stop being sorry about it. Because I am sitting at your table and I am drinking your coffee and I am eating your cake. You did not lose me. He almost did, and you did not. That is the version we are going to live in." She put her face in her hands and cried, finally, properly. Eunho got up and came around the table and put his arms around her and held her. Across the kitchen, Jiwan had stopped washing. He stood at the sink with his hands resting on the edge of it, his back to the table, giving them the room. Eunho's father stood up. He did not say anything. He walked the few steps from the table to where Eunho was holding his mother. He stopped behind his son. He put his hand on the back of Eunho's head, the way you put a hand on the head of a small child, and he held it there for the length of one breath. Then he took it away. He walked to the back door. He opened it. He stepped out onto the porch and closed it behind him. Eunho understood. His father had not had the words for any of it, and a man who had not had the words for any of it had walked across his own kitchen and put his hand on his son's head. That was the whole apology. Eunho took it. After a while, Jiwan dried his hands on the towel by the sink. He came over to the table and stood at the corner of it. Eunho's mother lifted her face from her son's shoulder. She looked at the man who had brought her son home. She looked at his face properly for the first time in her own kitchen. She saw the lines at the corners of his eyes and the quietness she had noticed in the doorway, and she saw the resemblance, faint, the same shape of the brow as his brother, and she saw every place where the resemblance ended. She held out her hand. One took it. He did not shake it. He held it. "Thank you," she said. "You don't have to." "Yes, I do." "Then you are welcome." Through the window on the porch, Eunho's father stood with his back to the kitchen, looking at the persimmon tree. His shoulders moved once. He stayed out there for a long minute. Then he came back in, sat down at the table, picked up his paper, and turned a page he had already read. The days at the parents' house ran into each other. There was no hurry. One made it clear there was no hurry. Eunho did not have to do anything. He did not have to talk about anything more than he wanted to. He did not have to make any decisions. There was nothing pressing that required him in Seoul or anywhere else. He drew at his old desk. The persimmon tree was the first thing he drew from the window in the morning light. He had drawn it from memory in the hotel. Drawing it from in front of it was different. The bare winter branches had a shape his memory had not gotten right. He drew the corrected shape. He filled 3 pages with it. His mother brought him tea while he drew. She did not interrupt. She set the cup on the corner of the desk and she went back downstairs. His father sat with him on the porch in the afternoons. They did not talk much. They watched the small birds in the persimmon tree. His father knew the names. He told Eunho the names. Eunho wrote them in the corner of his sketchbook. His father had not taught his son anything when his son was young, and the afternoons on the porch were the first time in many years that he had taught him anything. Both of them knew it. Neither of them said anything about it. One was there and one was not there. He left in the morning sometimes for a few hours. He went into Seoul. He came back in the afternoon. He did not always say where he had been. Eunho did not ask. He knew that something was being handled. He knew that whatever was being handled by Jiwan, and by Juan's father, and by Doyun, and that the handling did not require him. In the evenings, Jiwan was there. He sat with Eunho's father and his mother in the living room after dinner. He did not perform politeness. He was not good at small talk. He answered questions when asked. He listened more than he spoke. Eunho's mother, after the second evening, had started to like him. Eunho's father, who had not liked many people in his life, liked Jiwan by the third evening, and that was the rarer thing. The slow opening happened in pieces. On the third morning at the parents' house, Eunho came downstairs and sat at the kitchen table. Jiwan was already there, drinking coffee with Eunho's father. Without looking up from his paper, Eunho's father pushed the cup of coffee his wife had poured before going outside across the table. Eunho took it. Jiwan, beside him, reached over without looking and put his hand on the back of Eunho's neck. The hand was warm. The thumb moved once along the small bone at the top of Eunho's spine. Then the hand stayed there. Eunho did not move. His father turned the page of the paper. The hand stayed until Eunho's mother came in from the garden, then moved away, casually. Eunho continued drinking his coffee. He did not look at Won for a while. He was smiling at the cup. That evening, on the couch, watching nothing in particular on the television, Eunho leaned his head onto Won's shoulder without thinking. Won shifted slightly to fit. His arm came up over the back of the couch and rested behind Eunho's shoulders. They sat that way for an hour. Eunho fell asleep partway through. Won did not move. His arm went numb. He stayed. Eunho's mother came through with the laundry, saw them on the couch, said nothing. And as she came past again, she very gently laid a knit blanket over Eunho's legs without disturbing him. On the 5th night at dinner, under the table, without warning, Won's hand found Eunho's hand and held it. Just held it. The thumb moved once over Eunho's knuckles. They stayed like that for the rest of the meal, eating with the wrong hands. His mother saw. She did not say anything. Eunho was at his desk drawing one afternoon when Won walked past the open door, stopped, came in, bent down, and kissed the top of Eunho's head. The kind of kiss a person gives in passing, a thing that did not require an answer. Won walked out of the room without saying anything. Eunho went back to his drawing. His hand was steady. Won was, more than anything, simply there. He had been a man who, for a month at the hotel, had been afraid to touch Eunho's body. He had crouched in corridors with a hand palm up on the floor. He had not extended the hand. Now the hand reached. Now the hand rested. The fear in Won at the hotel hadn't been a fear of Eunho. It had been a fear of overstepping. The fear was gone. He had been told he could. Some days into the stay, Won went into Seoul and did not come back until late. Eunho was at the kitchen table with his mother when the car came up the drive. It was after dinner. They had been having a small argument about whether the carrot cake recipe needed more cinnamon, or whether the cinnamon had been balanced before, and Eunho had been laughing because the argument was the kind of argument he had not had with anyone in years. The easy laughing argument of two people who agreed on the actual stakes and were arguing for fun. The argument had stopped when the car pulled in. One came through the door with the cold on him. He took off his coat. He hung it up. He took off his shoes. He came into the kitchen and sat down at the table in the chair across from Eunho. He did not say anything for a moment. He looked tired in the bones, which Eunho had not seen on him before. What happened? One took a breath. I went to my father this afternoon. I gave him the file, the records, all of them. 9 years of accounts, the locations, the dates, the names. I drove it to the family compound and put it on the desk in his office and sat in the chair across from him while he opened it. 1. He read it through, slowly. He didn't speak while he was reading. When he was finished, he closed the file, put it on the corner of the desk, and looked at me. He said, "You've had this for 15 years. I said, "Yes." He didn't say anything for a long time. He stopped. And he said the thing I hadn't heard him say in my life. He said, "You've done well, Won." He paused. Then he stood up. He took the file. He told me to wait. When he came back, he told me what was going to happen. The June family is being notified tonight. The board of directors is being notified tonight. Jiwan is being formally removed from his position by morning. The divorce paperwork has been initiated through a family lawyer. The criminal complaint, which Doyun has been quietly preparing, will be filed Monday. My father won't interfere with the prosecution. Eunho's mother set down the spoon. Your father said all this. He said all this. Eunho's mother folded her hands flat together and pressed them against the front of her apron. Eunho looked at Won across the table. You have been carrying that for 15 years, and your father said it for the first time tonight. Yes. How does it feel? Won thought about it. I don't know yet. I had been imagining for 15 years what it would be like to hand him the file. I had imagined every version of his reaction. I hadn't imagined the version where he just said the words. I hadn't let myself. Eunho got up from his chair. He walked around the table. He stood beside Won's chair and put his hand on the back of Won's neck, mirroring what Won had done at this same table a few mornings before, and held it there. Won leaned slightly back into the hand. "I'm proud of you," Eunho said. Won did not answer. He closed his eyes. He held Eunho's wrist in his free hand. Eunho's mother went back to the counter and pretended to be doing something with the dishes. She was crying, quietly. The mathematics of what had been done in this house's name was a great deal at once. That night, in the bedroom, Won was the one who needed to be held. It happened naturally. Eunho lay down in the bed first. Won lay down next to him. Eunho turned toward Won and put his arm around Won's chest and pressed his face into Won's shoulder. And after a moment, Won's hand came up and covered Eunho's hand on his chest, and Eunho understood that for the first time since they had begun sleeping in this bed together, the holding was going in the other direction. Sights, Won did not cry. Eunho did not need him to cry. Eunho simply held him and felt him slowly let go of the day, and felt the iron in him bank down to the lowest temperature it had been at in 15 years. Won fell asleep before Eunho did. Eunho stayed awake, listening to him breathe, watching the shape of the persimmon tree against the moon. He understood, in the slow quiet, that he was now a home for someone, as Won had been a home for him. He had not been a home for anyone in his life. He had not believed he could be. He fell asleep thinking about it, and when he woke up, he was still thinking about it. The legal process moved fast. Within the week, Jiwan had been removed from every position he held in the family company. The Jun family had publicly withdrawn from every active deal. 2 other partner families followed within days. The divorce paperwork was signed by Won's father on Eunho's behalf with Eunho's permission, because Eunho had said he did not want to go into a room with Jiwan ever again, and the family lawyer had said he would not have to. The criminal complaint was filed on Monday. The charges were extensive. The family did not oppose the prosecution. The financial records were airtight. The kidnapping had been witnessed by Doyun's people, and Eunho's 6-year medical history of injuries treated quietly by family doctors had been subpoenaed. Eunho did not have to testify. The defense, before trial, took the plea. One told Eunho about the plea at the kitchen table on a Wednesday morning. He took the deal. What does that mean? He's going to prison. For a very, very long time. Eunho sat with the information. He looked at the persimmon tree through the window. He thought about a man named Jiwan at the dinner table years ago in a kitchen in Hanam-dong. He said, "Okay." He had no curiosity about where Jiwan would go or what would happen to him there. The man had been removed from his life in the only way his life had needed him removed. The new home was on the coast. One had bought it before the kidnapping. In the first week at the hotel, when he had begun to believe there was going to be a life on the other side of all of this, and that he wanted Eunho in it. He had not told Eunho. He had simply bought it, paid for the renovations, and waited. He told Eunho about it in the second week at the parents' house. "I've somewhere I want to take you, when you're ready." "Where?" "A house, on the coast. I bought it. I wanted you to have somewhere that wasn't the hotel and not your parents' house. Somewhere that was just ours." "You bought a house?" "Yes." "While we were at the hotel?" "Yes." "Why?" "Because I wanted you to have somewhere to go that wasn't the place you had been hurt. I wanted somewhere new. I wanted us to make the new place together. Take me to see it." They drove out the next morning. The house was small by one's family's standards. It sat on a low cliff above a small cove. A wooden porch wrapped around the front and side. The kitchen had windows that opened to the sea. 2 bedrooms upstairs. A small studio on the ground floor with a north-facing window. One had put in specifically because he had remembered Eunho saying once at the diner that north light was the best light for painting. Eunho stood in the studio. The walls were freshly painted, the cream color his mother had used in the kitchen of his childhood. The floor was wide plank wood. The window was as tall as the wall. The sea was visible through it. Against the far wall, a low shelf had been built in. On it sat an empty wooden easel, a stack of stretched canvases of different sizes, and a set of brushes still in their wrapping. He did not say anything. He turned around in the empty room. He walked to the easel and put his hand on the wood. One was in the doorway, watching him. You did this for me. Yes. You bought brushes. You said once at the diner that you used to mix your own greens. I didn't know what you would need. I bought the things that are the same, no matter who is using them. You didn't know I'd say yes. I didn't know. You bought a house with an easel for an Omega who hadn't said yes. I bought a house with a studio with a north-facing window. The Omega could decide. If you had said no, I'd have lived here alone, and the studio would have been a very nice empty room with a very nice empty easel. I didn't mind that outcome. I minded other outcomes more. Eunho laughed. It came up out of him hard. It was the first laugh he had laughed out loud in front of one that had not had grief at the edge of it. He walked across the studio. He put his arms around Juan's neck. He kissed him in the doorway of the empty room with the north-facing window overlooking the sea. I'm saying yes. I heard you. They moved in 2 weeks later. His mother helped them furnish it. By the end of the weekend, the house was their house. The studio had a desk and a chair and a shelf of supplies. The kitchen had pots and pans. The bedroom upstairs had a bed they had both picked out at a small store in town. Eunho started in the studio in the second week. He started with drawing again because the pencil was the medium his hand had been remembering. He drew the sea from the studio window on the third day, from the porch on the fourth, at sunset on the fifth. In the third week, he picked up a brush. He did not know what he was doing at first. 7 years was long enough to lose the hand. The first canvas was bad. He let it be bad. He set it against the wall and started another. The second was bad in different ways. By the fifth, the hand was beginning to come back. He could feel it. The wrist, the angle of the shoulder, the narrowing of the eye without permission when a color was off. He found a small weekend painting class in the town up the coast. He had asked one to drive him to the bakery one Saturday morning, and on the wall of the bakery there had been a flyer. A retired oil painter, a woman in her 70s who had moved out of Seoul to be near the sea, was teaching from her converted barn on Saturday mornings. The bakery woman saw him reading the flyer. She is a good teacher. 2 of my granddaughters went. One bought a box of yakwa from the case while Eunho was reading. The bakery woman wrapped them in paper. Eunho saw the box on the counter and his face did something. He had asked for them on a Tuesday morning that felt like a year ago. They had not been eaten yet. They were now. He took the flyer off the wall. He went to the first class the following Saturday. He sat up at an easel against the back wall of the barn and listened to the woman explain a primer he already knew the back of, and he was grateful that she was explaining it anyway, because hearing it again was a kind of being reintroduced to something that had once been his. He went back the next Saturday and the Saturday after that. The teacher did not push him. Once, when he was packing up, she put her hand on his shoulder briefly and said, "Your hand knows what it is doing. Trust it." And she walked back to the front of the barn. In the 6th week at the new house, his first heat approached. His body had been finding itself again since the rescue. The peach had returned fully on its own. The cycles his marriage had broken were beginning to remember themselves. He woke up one morning with the warmth at the base of his neck, and the small, sweet shift in his peach scent, and the faint trembling in his fingers he had not felt in years. He sat up in bed. One was already up, making coffee downstairs. Eunho came down the stairs. One looked at him from the kitchen. One's nostrils moved very slightly. One set down the coffee pot. "Eunho." "Yes." "Are you?" "Yes." One did not move. He stood at the kitchen counter with the coffee pot in his hand and the morning sun coming in through the window. The walnut in him was rising. "What do you want?" "I want you to ask me a question." "Which question?" "You know which question." One set the coffee pot down. He came around the counter. He stopped at a careful distance from Eunho, the same careful distance he had stopped at on the platform and in the corridor of the hotel a week after that. "Eunho." "Yes." "Do you want me to bond with you?" "Yes." "You are sure?" "Yes." "You can change your mind. Right up to the moment you can change your mind. I won't finish the bite if you say stop. I won't begin the bite if you say wait. I'm asking because I want you to know I'm asking. I've been thinking about asking for 2 weeks. The answer is yours. Take it. Eunho looked at him. He thought about Eunho at 21, lying in bed in the master suite in Hanam-dong in the 3rd week of a heat that would not end, with the alpha he was married to 2 rooms away on a phone call. Crying because that alpha had said, when Eunho had asked the question, that bonding was something they would do later. He had said it every heat. He had never bonded Eunho. He had wanted the option of releasing him. Eunho looked at the alpha in front of him in the kitchen of the house one had bought him with a north-facing window. He said, I used to cry myself to sleep because Jiwan didn't want to bond with me. Now I thank God he didn't. I get to choose this. I get to choose you. I get to mean it. Yes. One crossed the last of the distance between them. By that afternoon, the fever had taken him fully. One had drawn the curtains in the bedroom. One had brought a pitcher of water to the bedside, the kettle to the dresser, a small bowl of cool cloths to the chair. He had moved through the house quietly, the way a man moves who has been around fevered omegas before and knows the room belongs to the omega and not to him. Eunho lay in the bed in a thin shirt with his cheek against the pillow. The sun was a bright slat at the edge of the curtains. Every part of him was warm. One sat in the chair by the bed with his sleeves rolled to the elbow, and when Eunho reached, one took his hand. One. I'm here. Stay. I'm staying. I'm not going anywhere. The fever rose through the afternoon. Eunho slept and woke and slept again. Each time he woke, one was there, sometimes with water held to his mouth, sometimes with a cool cloth against his neck, sometimes only in the chair with his hand on Eunho's wrist, the thumb on the bone. One talked to Eunho through it, not loudly, not constantly. Small sentences when Eunho's eyes opened. Eunho, you are doing well. Drink this. I'm here. You can rest. The voice was the voice from the platform. The voice was the voice that had said, be safe in the elevator the morning before the kidnapping. It was a voice Eunho's body had learned to lean toward even before his mind had named what it was leaning toward. By evening, the fever was at the peak. Eunho turned in the bed and reached for him with both hands. One climbed in beside him, careful, not on top, beside, his arm under Eunho's head and the other along his side. Eunho pressed his face into the side of one's neck where the scent gland was, and the walnut filled his lungs and his peach rose to meet it. Now, Eunho said, please. Eunho, I want it. I'm sure. Please. Look at me. He looked at him. Are you sure? Yes. Both eyes open. Both eyes open. The bite was at the side of the throat over the scent gland, the way it was always done. One was careful. He named what he was doing before he did it. He gave Eunho one last small chance to stop. Eunho did not stop. Eunho felt the seal of it down to his ribs, a small hot weight settling behind his sternum, the place where Wan's voice had been living in his chest for weeks. Then Wan was holding him, and Wan's hand was at the back of his head, and Wan's voice was saying his name softly into his hair, and Eunho was breathing into his collarbone, and the fever was breaking, slowly, in the way fevers break in the bodies of the bonded, the worst of it lifting because the thing the body had been reaching for had been given to it. Eunho slept. One did not move for a long time. The morning after, Eunho woke up in the bed. One's arm was around his waist. The mark on Eunho's neck was new, a small warmth at the side of his throat. He raised his hand and touched it. The pads of his fingers fit over it, smaller than he had thought it would be. The right size, the right shape, the shape of Wan's mouth, the shape of a sentence that had been said permanently into him. He turned over inside Wan's arm. One did not loosen the arm. One was awake. Hi. Hi. Are you sorry? No. Are you sorry? No. Can I kiss you? Yes. Eunho kissed him. His hand on the back of Wan's neck. One's hand at the side of Eunho's throat, palm covering the new bond mark. Warm. The first day after the heat, Eunho slept most of it. One fed him soup. One kept the room dim. He read in the chair by the bed with his free hand resting on the bed close enough that Eunho could find it without opening his eyes. The second day, Eunho got out of bed and went down to the porch. One sat beside him. The sea was the sea it had been every day since they had moved in. One. Yes? I love you. I know. I haven't said it yet. I know. I'm saying it. I know. I love you too. I've for years. How many years? Since the family lunch, 3 years ago. I worried about you that day. I know. I told you that on the train. You told me you had thought it was disapproval. I was wrong. You were. He laughed. It came out small and easy. One's hand on the porch rail next to his hand. Their hands not touching, but close. The pregnancy came 6 weeks after the bonding. He had known before he had let himself think the word. The peach in his collar had shifted in the second week after the heat, the same shift he had felt in the early days of the 3 losses he had had with Jiwan. That shift had once been the worst news his body could bring him, because it had only ever ended one way, in a hospital and a quiet doctor and a piece of paperwork. He went to the doctor in town a few weeks in. He did not tell Juan. He did not want to tell Juan until he knew. The doctor confirmed it but said he should not assume anything yet because of his history. Come back in 2 weeks, then 2 weeks after that. He did not tell Juan at the 4-week mark or the 5-week mark. At the 6-week mark, he went back. The doctor did the second ultrasound and showed him the small, dark shape on the monitor. She said, "This is exactly where it should be. The heart rate is exactly what it should be. I cannot promise you anything. But if you want my honest opinion, this one is going to hold." Eunho cried in the doctor's office. The doctor handed him tissues. She let him cry. He drove home. One was in the studio, hanging a small shelf. He turned when Eunho came in. He saw Eunho's face. Eunho. Eunho closed the studio door behind him. One. I'm pregnant. One did not say anything. The walnut in his scent came up hard. He set down the small drill. How far? 6 weeks. You knew. I've been wondering for a few weeks. I went to the doctor a month ago. They confirmed today. The doctor said it could still go wrong. She said if I want her honest opinion, she thinks it will hold. One crossed the studio. He put his hands on Eunho's face. He looked at him. He bent his forehead to Eunho's forehead. Are you all right? Yes. Are you happy? Yes. So am I. Eunho cried into the front of his shirt. One held him. The studio was warm. The sea was outside the window. The shelf one had been hanging was crooked. They both laughed at the shelf, eventually through the crying. The first hill was at 6 weeks because 6 weeks had been the week of the 3rd loss. The last one, the one that had broken him. He woke that morning and did not get out of bed. One brought him coffee. One sat in the chair by the bed and did not ask him to do anything. The day passed slowly. Eunho lay in the bed and waited for the wrong thing to start. The wrong thing did not start. By evening he got up and ate a little soup and went back to bed and slept all the way through. The next morning he went to the porch and stood at the rail. One came out behind him. Eunho did not turn around. 6 weeks plus 1 day. Yes. That hasn't happened to me before. I know. I don't know what to do with it. You don't have to do anything with it. You just have to keep being here. Eunho leaned back against him. One's arms came around him from behind. He stayed there until the sea went silver in the late light. The second hill was at 9 weeks because 9 weeks had been the week of the first loss. Eunho counted the days down to it that week. He could not help it. By Tuesday, he had stopped painting in the afternoon. By Wednesday, he was lying on the couch in the living room with his hand on his stomach without knowing he had put it there. One kept the house quiet. One made the meals. One did not push. On the Thursday, Eunho called his mother. He had not told his mother about the pregnancy yet. He did not tell her now. He just called. His mother answered on the second ring. They talked about the carrot cake recipe and a bird his mother had seen at the persimmon tree. Eunho stayed on the phone for an hour. When he hung up, he was still pregnant. by Sunday, the week was over. He woke up on Monday morning and his body felt for the first time like a place he was allowed to be in. The third hill was at 11 weeks because 11 weeks had been the week of the second loss. By then, he had told his parents. His mother had cried. His father had walked over and put his hand on the back of Eunho's head, the same hand on the same place as the morning at the kitchen table. His father had said the thing he had said. "I'd like, if it's all right with you, to be a grandfather to this child." 11 weeks came. On a Wednesday, his mother drove out from the city that morning. She did not call ahead. She just drove. She came in through the front door with a tin of something she had baked, and she did not say anything about why she had come. She sat in the living room with Eunho all day. She knit. She drank tea. She talked about nothing, in the patient way of a mother who had decided to be in the room and was not going to make her son perform anything for her. By evening, Eunho was painting again at the easel in the studio with the door open, and his mother was in the chair in the corner, and Jiwan was making dinner in the kitchen, and the small, dark shape that had once been the worst news his body could bring him was still inside him. The pregnancy held. It held through the rest of the first trimester. It held through the second. The doctor in town did the regular checkups. Eunho's mother came out one weekend a month. His father came with her sometimes when he was up to the trip. They sat on the porch and watched the sea. His mother knit. His father read. One sat with his hand on Eunho's stomach in the evenings when the small movement had become something the hand could feel. Eunho painted through all of it. The first canvas that he kept was a small one, the size of a book. The sea outside the studio window at dusk, the colors of the water in the half hour before the light went. He hung it over the small desk in the studio and did not let anyone take it down. The teacher in the barn up the coast had told him, the Saturday before he had finished it, that he was painting again. He had said yes. She had said good. The studio walls filled with work. The sea. The persimmon tree. His mother, his father, one in the chair by the window, reading. The small, dark shape of the second ultrasound, painted small in oils, framed in a wooden frame one had made for him. The baby was born in the spring. It was a boy. Eunho's mother had wanted a boy and had been very careful not to say so. She held him in the hospital with a face Eunho had not seen on his mother before. A face from before he had ever known her. The face of a woman who had been a young mother once and had not stopped being one. They named him a name they had both liked the sound of. Nothing more than that. They wrote it on the form. They took him home to the house on the coast. A second boy came 2 years later. By then, they had started looking for a slightly larger house because the small one was not going to fit 4. One had been working a few hours a week on a quiet handover of the family business to a younger cousin. He said when the second pregnancy was confirmed that he was going to be done by the end of the year. He was. He kept a small advisory role for the family for a year because his father had asked, and after the year he stepped out of that too. He took up something quiet. He walked, he read, he cooked eventually, which surprised everyone, including him. He learned by watching Eunho's mother on the visits. The boys grew. The older had one's quiet, the younger had Eunho's. They went to the parents' house on holidays and on the summer weekends when his mother needed help with the garden, and on the autumn afternoons when the persimmon tree was in fruit and the children could pick the low ones from the lower branches. Eunho painted the tree every year. He published a book of his paintings the year the older boy turned 3. A small book. Small print run. The cover was the persimmon tree from the back garden in winter, the bare branches against a pale sky. It sold well enough that he was asked to do another. The second was the sea outside the studio window. His mother kept a copy of each on the shelf by the kitchen window. It was a Saturday afternoon in the spring when the boys were 3 and 1. They had driven up from the coast that morning. The boys had run for the persimmon tree before the car was unpacked. His mother had been at the door before the engine cut. The persimmon tree was in young leaf. The afternoon light was warm, pale gold through the kitchen window. Eunho's mother was at the counter with the younger boy on her hip, peeling an orange and telling him about the bird she had seen that morning. The younger boy was too young to listen to a story, but he was watching her face, and that was enough for her. One was on the porch. He had a book in his hand. He had not turned a page in a while. He was watching the older boy run across the grass under the persimmon tree, chasing a small white butterfly. Eunho was at the kitchen table. He had set up a small board across his lap with a clipped sheet of paper on it and a tin of pencils at his elbow, and was working out the composition of a painting he had been thinking about for 2 weeks. The 4 of them in this kitchen. One on the porch. The boys in the grass. His mother at the counter. His father in the armchair. He was not painting yet. He was deciding where everyone would sit on the canvas. The sketch was rough. He liked it that way at this stage. He looked up from the page. He looked through the kitchen window. He saw Juan on the porch and the older boy on the grass and the persimmon tree in the spring afternoon. He saw his mother at the counter beside him, the small head of his younger son against her shoulder. He saw his father in the armchair in the living room, asleep with a newspaper folded in his lap. He thought, for a half-second, about an Eunho who had been 25 and tied to a chair in a warehouse. About an Eunho who had been 21 and lying in bed in Hanamdong, crying because the alpha he was married to would not bond him. About an Eunho who had been 18 and standing in line in a coffee shop in Seongbuk-gu with 3,000 won in his pocket and an acceptance letter folded in his bag. He thought, in the warm, pale light of the kitchen, what he had not been able to think for years. He said it out loud into the warm air. "I'm happy." On the porch, one closed his book. He set it down on the small wooden table beside his chair. He stood up. He came in through the kitchen door, ducking slightly under the low frame the way he had ducked under the bookshelf in Eunho's old bedroom on the first night. He crossed the kitchen to where Eunho was sitting at the table. He stopped behind Eunho's chair. He put one hand on the back of Eunho's neck. The hand was warm. The thumb moved once over the bond mark at the side of Eunho's throat, where it had been the first morning at the new house and every morning since. "I know," Juan said. He bent down. He kissed the top of Eunho's head, the kind of kiss a person gives in passing, and then he did not move away. He stayed there for a moment with his hand on Eunho's neck and his face in Eunho's hair, and Eunho felt the walnut in him rise fully, warmer than the iron, the warmest it had ever been. "Eunho, yes, you make me the happiest man in the world." Eunho closed his eyes. He put his hand over Juan's hand. He held it. The hand on his neck was the man who had crouched on a cold platform with one hand palm up on the concrete. The man who had sat in a hotel chair for 3 weeks reading. The man who had broken a warehouse door off its hinges. The man who had carried him out. Eunho turned his face up. One bent down. They kissed. Soft. Brief. The kind of kiss 2 people give each other in their own kitchen in the middle of an ordinary afternoon, when the kids are outside and the grandmother is at the counter and the grandfather is asleep, and there is nothing else that needs to happen. When Juan straightened, the older boy was at the back door, pressed against the screen, watching them. "Dad." Juan looked over. "I caught a butterfly. Come see." "All right." Juan kissed the top of Eunho's head one more time. He went out to the porch, then down the steps and crouched in the grass beside his son. The older boy showed him cupped hands, opened them carefully, and a small white butterfly lifted out of his palm and rose toward the persimmon tree. Eunho watched them through the window. His mother, at the counter, set the orange peels aside and put a hand on Eunho's shoulder as she passed and went out to the porch to call the older boy in for a drink. The younger boy on her hip reached one small hand out toward Eunho as she went, and Eunho caught it and held it briefly and let it go. He looked at his sketch on the small board across his lap. The figures were rough. He had drawn Juan on the porch, the older boy in the grass, his mother at the counter, his father in the armchair. He had not drawn himself yet. He picked up the pencil. He added a chair at the kitchen table and a small figure in it. The end. Thank you for listening. If you enjoyed the story, tell me your thoughts in the comments. I'd love to hear from you.